Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon and for sharing all your experiences so far with email marketing. I'm very aware that obviously there are quite a few marketing and communications people in the room, and by all means, please pick up with any of us afterwards. I'm sure any of us in the room will be able to and happy to answer any of your questions. As Matthew said, we've obviously got a limited period of time, so we'll kind of have a whistle-stop tour starting from the real basics of why you'd want to even think about email marketing through to covering some of the different platforms, and we'll try at the end to see if we can fit in some of your specific questions. As we're fairly limited for time, if you think of questions as you go along, perhaps it would be useful to either pop them in the chat or make a note of them, and then we can always come back to them at the end, or as I said, pick up afterwards, if that's okay. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. So as I said, this presentation is really starting with an introduction to email marketing and then Mailchimp as one platform I've chosen to use. We're going to start from the beginning and work forward. So we can get, here we go. So starting off with, why would I want to use email marketing at all? And it's great to hear that lots of you are already using email marketing and in quite different ways. I personally am a big fan of email marketing, making sure that you do use it in different ways. So it's great for building customer relationships. It can be really useful for both prospects and existing customers in terms of either generating leads through prospecting and managing the inbound journey in terms of when you first meet someone to them actually becoming a customer, through to actually developing your relationships and staying top of mind for existing customers so that you drive repeat purchase. It can work for both those different audiences. It can be about those regular updates, those monthly newsletters, those what's going on, or the weekly what's on, for example, with Lymington. And it can also be used for sharing specific news. So like Flora said, if she's got one particular thing to say and one particular time thing, it can work well in both ways. It's very flexible. You can use it to demonstrate thought leadership, so sharing what you've written about something, your advice, sharing tips, etc., as we mentioned, and also driving conversions, event bookings. There's so many different ways you can use email marketing. And the important thing is, whatever time you use it, you're very clear on what you're using it for, so that you've got that one specific objective in mind. I want to drive bookings for this event, or I want to update my customers, so that you design your communication accordingly to hit that objective. The reason why lots of people use email marketing is about the return on the investment. And there's just one quote here, which you'd find plenty of other alternatives on the internet, about for every dollar you spend on email marketing, you can expect an average return of 42. Now, clearly that's based on more of a kind of consumer business where you're driving specific sales of something. But I think the second phrase holds true in most situations, that it is a higher return than you can expect from other forms of marketing. And particularly where it works so well is that it can be very targeted. So one of the things we started to talk about, when it's really targeted, it's most effective. And you're limiting, therefore, your wastage and getting the most out of what you're investing in your hard-earned money. So you decided you want to use email marketing. Which tool should you use? Here is just a selection of the hundreds of email marketing tools that are available. You have seen in our conversation so far, we've already mentioned Mailchimp, Sendinblue, Constant Contact, and others. They all have slightly different ways of doing things. They all have very similar ways of doing things, like any kind of tech tool. They're all competing against each other and trying to offer similar and slightly better things. In terms of what you choose to use, I'd really think about what you want to use it most for, if you've got a budget to invest, and then perhaps look at 2 or 3 alternatives and really compare them closely. There are, for example, I put there a link to, best email marketing software. There are lots of things you can type in to try and get some guidance. Obviously, some of those are paid for by the people that are involved in them, so you have to take them with a bit of a pinch of salt. But what they can be useful for is drilling out the differences between them. So things like that best email marketing software list is going to tell you what's good, particularly good for this or particularly good for that. Most of them do have, starting from a free service right through to a paid for service for massive major multi-companies. For the purposes of today, I'm going to talk about Mailchimp because it's one that is used by lots and lots of businesses. However, what we're going to talk about, a lot of it will apply in similar ways. I personally use Mailchimp, and as someone mentioned earlier, I found it quite idiot-proof, quite easy to find your way around. And some of the others can be more complex. But for example, HubSpot, you can link more clearly into your CRM system. So clearly, if you're using HubSpot CRM already, then that's going to be a benefit for you. So lots of different tools to choose from. Happy to spend more time on this later. The important thing is to say is think about your budget and what you're really going to use it for, and compare a few different alternatives. So using Mailchimp as our example, Mailchimp started out, I remember many years ago, as an email marketing option. Similar to what someone said earlier, I think it was Lizzie. Well, I worked at a tiny business about 10 years ago, which was basically a mum and a husband, and that was it. And they basically had no budget. So it was, what can we do in marketing for free? And Mailchimp was a brilliant thing that we could do back then, because it was a way of reaching out for customers. It started out as just email marketing, but it now offers, like many of these kind of tools, much, much more. So you can use it as just an email marketing platform, but as you'll see from some of the examples here, you can also use it to create your website and all sorts of other things, and start taking over some of your marketing automation and all of your communications. So they can do a lot, or they can do a little. It's up to what you're looking for. You'll see here Mailchimp has these 4 different levels. And in any of the tools you look at, most of them have this kind of tiered pricing platform, starting from the free option and obviously investing a little more per month. For most small businesses that I come across, most of them can manage with the free option. And we're going to talk a bit more about what you get out of the free option and why you may want to invest to upgrade and other things. But the free option allows you to send 10,000 emails to 2,000 contacts. And for most of the small businesses I come across, that's going to be absolutely fine. And yes, there's some time to invest in actually designing and creating content, but ultimately it's a free channel to communicate with your customers, so that makes it a big thumbs up. In terms of getting started, if you're using the free option, so once you set up your accounts, the first thing you're going to want to do is design what you're going to send out. With the free option, you get these 2 basic templates on the left-hand side, which I've just circled in the pink. One is designed about selling products, as they call it, and one that's about making an announcement. And these are literally drop and go templates, which you can populate with your own information. Clearly, there are lots more different kinds of templates, as you can see on the right-hand side, but these are the ones that you would need to pay for to get that kind of flexibility of design. There are also here several themes, so you can see there's different themes. So if you're not a particularly confident designer, you can look at themes and go, oh, do you know what, I like that one, I'm happy to have something similar to that. But these are the paid for options. So this is obviously you're getting something because they've done some design work for you, but clearly you've got to pay for that. Another option in terms of design, if you didn't feel confident yourself, is also you can ask a web designer, a graphic designer, a design type creative to actually create you a template which you can upload and use yourself. So again, there's a cost there in terms of creating a template, but you can upload that template and use it. It might be a quicker and more effective way for some of you to feel confident in your design. So gives you an idea. Once I've chosen which template I want to work for, it's literally a drag and drop kind of situation. So I add a photo here, I would click on this box and it will allow me to upload a photo from obviously my own desktop or use something that's an image-free rights on the internet. I can then change this text. I can change what happens to this button. I'm literally dragging and dropping. And that's what I like about Mailchimp, is once you're in it, I think it's quite a user-friendly system in terms of drag and drop, type over, you can delete boxes, you can duplicate them, fairly straightforward in how you use it. And to give you an example, here's just a quick and dirty what you might be able to do with that template to create a communication which you can send directly to your customers. Once you've designed what you want to send out to your audience and your content, the next thing obviously is creating your audience. And there's several ways you can import your audience into Mailchimp, from again the very simple up to the much more complex. You'll see here you can add your own contacts. So for many of the businesses I work with, there's an Excel database knocking around somewhere where they've excuse me, captured the email addresses, for example, of people that have ordered from them. And as long as they've ordered from you, you can upload those and you can write at the bottom of the email, you are receiving this email because you bought a product from us. So that's your reason for using their email address. Obviously, for the more sophisticated, you can have a sign up form on your website, which is directly linked into your Mailchimp database. You can ask people at networking, would you like to join my database? There's all sorts of ways that you can grow your audience. And the audience is absolutely critical because A, it needs to be relevant, as we've talked about. If I get emails that aren't that useful for me, I'm just going to delete them. The more interested your audience is, the better your open rates and the more successful you will be. But also, clearly, we need to make sure that you're being GDPR compliant. And that's another whole session, which I'm sure NFBP have had before and will have again, but making sure that you are GDPR compliant. But in principle, it's a common sense approach, which is if you've got permission to email someone, then you can email them. And if you haven't, then you shouldn't. So once you've uploaded your audience, so you've got your design, it looks lovely, I've got my audience, I'm ready to send it to people, I can send it out with a press of a button, and next thing I'm looking for is the results. And as some of you mentioned, Mailchimp gives you quite a lot of free information, which can be very helpful. So here I've just given you an example of the kind of basics of a report that you'll get. In this particular example, it tells me that 166 opens of whatever I sent. There were 15 clicks, 52 bounce and 7 unsubscribes. And those bounce and unsubscribes links us obviously a bit towards spam filters, which I think we'll pick up at the end as another sort of separate topic. You can hear it tells me the total number of opens, when it was last opened, if anyone forwarded it, the total number of clicks. There are lots of information as a snapshot to what's going on with people who have actually received my email. What have they done about it? We can then drill into a lot more information than this. So you can look at where those clicks were. So if, for example, as someone mentioned, you've got an email with several different links, you can see which of the links were the most popular, how many times each individual link was clicked on. You can also look here by location. So, for example, in this case, most of the opens were in the United Kingdom, and you would want to compare that to your database. So is it in line with your audience? Are you suddenly getting lots of people opening it from India when you've only got 4 of them on your database or something like that? So it's always useful to look at the location, and particularly if you're a global company, when you send your email may affect your location's opens, because clearly if you're sending it in the middle of the night, in China, they're going to take a lot longer to open it or may not open it as successfully as others. What you can also do is look at the most engaged subscribers. So you can start to look, as someone said, about who's opened it recently. And yes, you're not going to be Big Brother and say, you opened my newsletter, but it is a good reason to get in touch, or you might know the kind of thing that they're interested in. So if you do call them for a catch up, you can mention that particularly they might be interested in probate at the moment or something like that. So you can tailor communication towards them by seeing who's open what in your email and therefore what's of most interest to them. So the analysis is a really great and useful part. And the other thing is about comparing campaigns. So you can see how some campaigns might be more successful than others and start to try and understand why that might be once you start sending a few different newsletters. Customer journeys. I'm really pleased someone mentioned this in the interview. So where Mailchimp has obviously moved on from its original design an email, find an audience, send it out, job done, what they're starting to do is get much more involved in automation. So this, I think, is a huge benefit of Mailchimp, but it is a paid for benefit. So clearly you're getting a lot more out of it because you're automating, you're saving yourself time, but you have got to pay for the privilege. You'll see here they have a lot of suggested journeys. So you've got here, for example, welcoming new contacts or recovering lost customers. Here you can set a journey. So you can say, if the customer does this, send them this email. If they don't respond, then do this within a certain period of time. You can automate lots and lots of your activities. And for some businesses, this could be a hugely life-changing, certainly time-changing tool to use. We've all been the one where you get offers to an abandoned cart. We've all had the email that says, oh, did you forget something? Did you leave it behind? And although most of us find it annoying, actually for some businesses it is very successful and useful. And some customers will receive that email and go, oh, brilliant, I'm so glad you've reminded me. So customer journeys can be a really effective method in your communications. What you need is that time up front to set what those journeys will be and what you want to get out of them. And if you are going to start using customer journeys, I'd encourage you to spend that time up front, but also start simple. So don't be too frightened by it all. Start with something simple like a welcome email. So at least you're starting to use it in some way, and then you can build upon it in the future with more detailed journeys. So in terms of the other paid for options, kind of coming full circle on Mailchimp, what you can see here now is if you want to use those customer journeys, for example, you're into the essential and the standard kind of platforms where you'll need to be paying for those options. You can see, for example, do things like time optimization in the standard package. So where, as Flora said, she probably sends hers out at lunchtime because that's kind of common sense. People are getting hungry at that time. For other businesses, it might be more difficult to think when is a suitable time. And by paying for that service, it will optimize it for you as to what the computer thinks. Now, I'm a firm believer in common sense, and most small businesses owners know their business. So most of us think it's fairly straightforward of when would be the right time. But for some businesses, that would be an option that might be worth paying for. The other thing you'll see in the paid for options is the custom branding and then the custom templates. So what you're getting is that ability to take off the Mailchimp logo from the bottom and brand your email communications much more. And this, again, will depend on your business and your audience to how important you think that is. For a lot of small businesses, they can make the standard free platform work. But if you did want to have that slightly more professional kind of type approach, you might want to move that up. The other thing is the essentials. You do get 24 email and chat support. So you are going to get that assistance from them to make it happen. Obviously, if you've got a friendly marketing consultant that can help, then you might be all right with the free option. But if you really wanted to go for it and weren't sure that you had that support, it might be worth paying for, at least to begin with. And then you can always consider changing your platform afterwards. Once you feel more confident with it, you might then be happy to work off just the free option. So my top tips before we kind of start to move on to some of the questions raised are, I'm a firm believer in just go for it when it comes to email marketing. I think lots of people are quite scared of it, but equally lots of us have said how valuable we think it is and how useful it can be, and genuinely how it can drive real income for your business. So if you're going to go for it, it's think about what you want to achieve with it, who you're trying to talk to, what you need to tell them, all the basics of any marketing communication, and then just get started. Don't be afraid to play around and experiment. So don't be afraid to try a different tactic. So maybe try a newsletter with lots of different bits of information, but then try a one-off with one specific piece like Flora's done to see if there's a different response. Or try two in a week and then wait a month to see what happens. If you're new to it, don't be afraid to play around and experiment. Most of your audience will be pretty, understanding to begin with. Ultimately, it's about start communicating with your customers. There are so many brilliant small businesses that I meet all the time, and they just understandably struggle with the time or the money to actually communicate how brilliant they are. But I always encourage you, most of you have got brilliant things going on in your businesses that actually people are interested to hear about. And whether that's sharing it through your social media or on your website and blogs or in email newsletters, I'd encourage you to communicate where you can, because people genuinely, if they're the right people, will be interested to hear. So one of the things I'm going to move on to now is I'm going to pick up some of the questions that we started with, and then obviously I'll hop in the chat and we'll open the floor to any other questions. Some of the things that came up first was about open rates. So I see a lovely competition going on about -56, -20, this, that, and the other. Open rates and what we call CTR, so click-through rates, are a really useful basic benchmark of your communications. So clearly you're going to look at it and say how many people opened or not. I'd urge it with a pinch of salt. So for example, there is a well-known luxury brand that I love. I say well-known, it's well-known to me. I absolutely love it. They send me lots of emails. I don't open them because 90% of the time, I'm not in the market to buy those luxury products. However, Christmas birthdays, once in a while, I go, oh, I'm going to upgrade. And the fact that I don't open their emails doesn't make me useless. So they are still communicating with me, even though I haven't opened their email. So from that brand's perspective, they'll be looking at me going, she never opens her emails. I've still seen their brand name. It still reminded me. And I know that next time I'm in the market for something luxury, I will choose them because they've remained top of mind for me. So I urge you that just because people don't always open your emails, please don't think that they're not necessarily seeing your message. You'll find people talking about similar things. They call them the LinkedIn lurkers, people that don't seem to like your posts, don't seem to comment on them, and suddenly will phone you one day and go, oh, I saw your post on LinkedIn, ... Just because you can't prove or see by statistics, however great they are, that people are communicating with you doesn't mean it's wasted. Second thing, open rates will vary completely by your audience, by your content, and by other differing factors. So some industries are known to have better open rates than others. And there are, if you look on the internet, various statistics about, what's an average open rate for this kind of company versus that kind of company. So all businesses will be different. And even within your own communications, for example, I've got a client where, we've had very different open rates based on different things we've sent out. So for example, I know, Chris, you mentioned after COVID, this client had been particularly overwhelmed during COVID. The lead times went through the window, just couldn't meet customer expectations. And they just literally sent an I'm sorry email. And it just said, I'm sorry. And, it just said, I'm sorry, we've done our best. It's been a bit of a disaster. And it got really high open rates because it was very simple. And actually it was very honest and open. But now that's passed, that's sort of a one-off, if you know what I mean, then now we're back into the normal, here's our newsletter, here's what's going on. It's clearly going to have a lower open rate, but we're not going to wish for another COVID pandemic just so we can get a high open rate. So again, open rates are really useful to look at, but Stacey, I wouldn't be downhearted that yours is 20% and Phil's is 56 and all that kind of thing. What I think they're most useful for is yourself. So you can look at what sort of campaigns have higher or lower open rates, and therefore possibly your audience is telling you what they're more interested in. Does that help on the open rates thing? Okay, right. Then the other thing we were going to talk about was the automation side, which we've talked a little bit about. Oh, spam. That's it, spam filters. I knew there was the other big one that came up. So spam filters are getting harder and harder to get through, to a point where I'm actually in the process of moving house, and I missed a document from my solicitor, which I found has been sat in my spam for a week, even though I've had emails from her before come into my inbox. I've responded to those emails, so I'm clearly sending a message to my email provider that I like this person, I want to open and read their emails, and they've still sent them to my spam afterwards. So spam filters are getting harder and harder, and I'm afraid I'll be very honest and say a lot of the emails you send will go into spam filters, because even trusted people in trusted providers from trusted things I know are still going down that route. There is very little that you can do about it. It's a bit like Facebook algorithms, you can try and work out the system and you can try and do your best, but you can't suddenly magic your way onto Facebook post number one. There are some basics that you can do to help, and that's about having a decent kind of database. So obviously, if you send emails and the more people unsubscribe from it, report it as spam, all those things, then clearly you're not sending a great message that you're a really worthy provider. So that's why it's important to get the quality of your database right in the first place, so that you don't go through that that's what's going to sort of put a little black mark towards you. The other thing is also having good open rates will help. So clearly the more people open your email, the more you're sending the message to the providers, just like the more people that react with your Facebook post, it tells Facebook that you're worthy and interesting. So clearly sending things that have decent open, people are more likely to open. And as someone said, those first few words can be really important, not over emailing, because we all know if you get a message every few days from the same provider, you just start to delete. So it's thinking about quality over quantity and putting those effort in to do the best you can do, but also accept that it is a bit of a losing battle in terms of there is no magic wand to get through spam filters or not. It can be useful now and again to mention to people, if you're chatting to them anyway, oh, did you see my email newsletter? And also asking people to add, your email to their safe senders list. It can also be useful to make sure you send your email as in your email marketing, from a named person. So rather than sending it from the info@4cmarketing.co.uk, you send it from the Caroline@4cmarketing, because again, it's a person, which makes it a bit more personalized. And also personalizing the emails you send. So if you get an email that says, "Hi Matthew, it was really lovely to see you last week, ... here's my follow-up presentation," again, you're more likely to open it because it's personalized and it's telling the computers and the systems that I've put the effort in to personalize it to you. So those are some of the things that you can do. But by all means, again, have a look on Google, search it out. What can I do to get through spam filters? And if you come up with anything new and useful, please feel free to share it with the group.
Caroline,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but on that point, I wanted to do exactly that. You've just made me come up with an idea. You can tell through Mailchimp the email addresses that didn't open.
Yeah.
So what you can do over time is email them directly, not through Mailchimp, from your account to their account. Just say, "Hi, we're wondering whether you may have fallen off the list. Can you check and take yourself out of spam," kind of thing, because they won't know if they don't check their spam folders.
No.
But messages like that should get through.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really good idea, Phil. And as you see, it demonstrates the usefulness of the analytics. That it's as useful to see who does open your emails as to who doesn't, because they can tell you, both information in different ways. So thanks for sharing that, Phil.
Thank you for giving me the idea.
That's good. Right, I'm just looking in the chat to see if we've got any other specific questions. I don't think we are, apart from obviously Phil totally agree that GDPR is a pain, though clearly an excellent initiative to keep us all safe. Is there any other questions people would like to share now?
I've got a question, if that's all right.
Yeah, you're fine.
Oh. Hello?
Hi, yeah. We just
sorry, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I was going to say just about the name and the spam thing.
Yep.
I've got two email addresses. I tend to send it from hello@forestfoodie,
Yep.
but then when it says who's it from, I say it's from Flora@forestfoodie. Do you mean editing it to say Flora@forestfoodie, or
Yep.
would it be better for me to send it from my Flora@ email address, if that makes sense?
Yep, it does. What you're doing is better than. I think it would be better to actually send it from Flora@forestfoodie, but it is, and I think, I can't prove it or not. I would test it. So
Okay.
change one and see if the rate is any different. And
would that make it? Sorry, carry on. I was going to say, would that make a difference because a lot of people haven't had an email from flora@forestfoodie.com before, if that makes sense? So they're signing up based on hello@. Would that make any difference?
It wouldn't, because they're signing up to the Forest Foodie using
Fine, okay.
the company. So we've given the information to the company to use. There's an element of, yes, if someone has previously opened one of your hello apps, that then they might not get a Flora@, but then there's obviously a chance that people haven't got the hello @ it's gone into their spam, and they might get the Flora@. So it is to me, it's all about testing, or as I say, if you've signed up to the kind of paid for Mailchimp option, you can ask them. You can say to them, what do they think is the best option? If they're giving you that support, they want you to get the highest open rates, so they may be able to share something with you in their kind of wider research and experience.
Well, thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I'll get the techie one out of the way first. A lot of people don't seem to know about setting up DNS records to make sure that messages from a mail provider's server get through. And although the providers do prompt you to do this, it is a bit of a techie thing, and people tend either to ignore it or feel frightened about doing it. But it's definitely worth doing. It does improve your breakthrough rate very significantly.
Mm-hmm.
My other comment was on open rates, and really interested in your point about how you get the luxury brands emails, but you don't necessarily open them. I never thought about that. What a great point. But what I would say is that your open rate is going to depend very much on how you've built your list. So Phil's got probably mostly people who've liked what they've heard about him and they've signed up on his website voluntarily. So guess what? They're going to almost certainly open his email when they get it. Whereas if, say, I don't know, you've been selling stuff on an e-commerce website and through legitimate interest, you decide you want to add people to your mailing list so they know about future new products. And I do think that's in legitimate interest to do that, but you'll probably see a much poorer open rate on that one.
You're absolutely right, Rob. You know, in some cases, a 2% open rate would be considered to be good. And there's Stacey worrying about a 20%. And actually, Stacey, your 20%, some of that might be based on just people you've met networking. So that's absolutely fine to send it to them, but they're not necessarily going to be, you know, that interested in it at that point. I think the other thing to think about open rates is, as I say, it depends on your audience. So, for example, one of my customers, they sell garden buildings. Now, garden buildings are expensive. We don't all buy that many greenhouses and that many summer houses in our lives. However, they're very high value. So to communicate with their existing audience that may have bought a greenhouse, but actually might need a shed or a garage or a carport or home office or some of the other things they sell, that's still useful. So their database, in a sense, is already bought on a relatively, you know, low repeat purchase type product. But it doesn't mean it's wasted to actually tell them, you know, what else we've got available, because then all it takes is one or two of those customers to buy, oh, actually, I do want a home office for another £15,000, and suddenly they've got a massive return on something that cost them very little. And if people really don't want to hear from them, they'll just unsubscribe. So exactly, open rates are useful, but it's definitely worth, you know, adding that pinch of salt, that common sense to them, in my point of perspective. You also got to think about mobile as well, because obviously some people can scroll through them on their mobiles without actually opening them. Laura.
Hi, sorry, another question. I'd quite like to maybe upload a video or something, but it always says it's too high res or whatever. And I don't know how to change the resolutions. Is there a way to do that, or would it be better to put a link to YouTube or something, or Vimeo or whatever they are?
Rob's nodding. Do you want to answer that one, Rob?
YouTube every time. Don't host video on your own server. Your hosting company will hate you for it, and it'll be less effective as a delivery mechanism. So definitely put it on YouTube and embed that YouTube link. And a lot of the email builders have actually got a block within their system to let you do that very easily.
Okay, thanks.
And of course, you may even pick up extra customers from being on YouTube.
Yeah,
you never know. So,
second biggest search engine.
Yep.
Yeah. In the absence of any other hands, can we just be sure, Caroline, that we've ticked the box on this GDPR thing? Because we did a whole lot of training at the time it came in, and you're absolutely right. We need to remind people again, because there's still people who think it is all permission based. Now, there is that second point, that if they have bought from you, that it is a legitimate interest to contact people. And I come across so many businesses who just don't contact. So for example, if Alice's business didn't contact everyone who stayed at Holborn, of course they can unsubscribe if they want to. That would be a real pity. Now, you've just got to be careful and make it clear, like Caroline said, but it's such a pity when people think it can only be those who've written in triplicate to say, you can send me an email. I don't know if Lucy, you've got a thought on that.
That too. I thought that exact same thing, that all you have is permission to say, you bought from me, is it okay to add you to our list? But that was about all you could ask.
If you want me to confuse you, there are 5 reasons you can add people to your list, but let's just stick with 2.
I think, and that's the thing, it is about common sense. Matthew, I totally agree with you. I get as frustrated with businesses that think they can't do anything compared to the global businesses I still see out there, which as far as I'm concerned are breaking the rules, because it's still a tick box which says, if you don't want to hear from us, tick this box, and that's wrong. You have to opt in. So there are still people getting it wrong in all sorts of different ways. For me, it comes back to common sense, which, as you say, Matthew, is the legitimate interest side, which is, if you can explain to people why you've done it and why you feel that it's common sense and acceptable to do so, and you make that very clear. So, for example, in the client where you've bought something from me, at the end of every communication that we do with them on email, it says, you have sent this email because you previously purchased a product from us. If you do not wish to no longer, receive our emails, please unsubscribe. Because then we've been very clear. Or if it's you sent this email because you've previously been on one of our training courses or that kind of thing, as long as there's a legitimate reason and you've made it clear what that is, then you've certainly followed very much the spirit and done your best. Lucy, did you have a view on it?
No, was it not a question about GDPR? Sorry, I raised my hand too late. It was just about marketing, emailing, and then relating that to like your social media or LinkedIn and everything without like flooding people with the same information, or is it better to do that? Just thoughts on that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would tend to use social media as being very immediate. So obviously on social media, generally you're talking to people every day, you know, or at least a couple of times a week. So it's much more frequent than I would use email marketing for most of my kind of business clients. So I would use them both, because your social media audience is clearly, unless you know you're certain people in the whole wide world, going to be limited in the sense of few of your audience will actually see your posts, whereas theoretically everyone on your database will see your email even if they choose not to answer it, if that makes sense. So I could go on LinkedIn every day and I could be connected with Matthew but never see any of his posts, never be aware he's communicated anything about anyone, because the algorithm just isn't showing them to me, and I don't spend 24 hours a day scrolling through every single one of my posts. So yeah. I think it's worth duplicating content in the sense of, if I've got an event coming up, for example, yes, I would put it on a social media, but I would also email about it, and I'd also send an email reminder nearer the time. I think businesses are often scared of repeating information when actually we all have busy lives, we all forget. Yes, we don't want to be bombarded, but there's nothing wrong with reminding people. But I also often use it as a roundup. So for some of our clients, it will be, you know, did you see our new blog this month? Did you see that? We kind of pull a lot of information together based on a certain theme. So it will be repurposing content a lot of the time. And then we try and have something that's new and exclusive for the newsletter, so it's like a reason to open it as well. So it's a bit of a mixture, really. But yeah, definitely would, you know, be confident about repurposing and reusing content, because just because it's been on social doesn't mean people have seen it.
Okay, thank you.
Jane.
I just wanted to add to that one thing that we do with the Lymington.com newsletter is we take the online link to the newsletter. So once it's been sent, it gets a link from the email provider. And first of all, we put that on our website. That might not apply to everybody, but it's quite a useful thing, because it's actually useful for yourself as well, because you can always tell people where they can look at a previous newsletter. But what we then also do with regard to the social media point is we do a post about the newsletter with a link to that link, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it's kind of it's the other way around of what Caroline was saying. It's sort of closing the loop, really, that you're trying to make all your different marketing channels work together, and make as much of them all at the same time as you possibly can.
And exactly, if you have a sign up online type, you know, form which says, you know, sign up to our mailing, people will often do that. They'll post on their social media, just sent out our latest newsletter. If you haven't received it, sign up here, because it's another way of growing your audience. And people go, oh, have I missed out on something? You know, if they're interested, then they'll follow that link. Clearly, not all businesses will have that form and that way of capturing emails in the right way, but it can be really useful to grow your audience by, say, doing it into social media afterwards, as well as using social media content to go into your email newsletter.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, because what we do with that, the posts with the link to the newsletter, is we send those to the newsletter sign up page. So it's a kind of double whammy, that they can see the latest newsletter and also sign up.
And as Rob will tell you, it's also possible to automate the posting of that newsletter onto your website. So you've always got your latest newsletter there, just as we do with NFBP. So we're running out of time now. So thank you, Caroline, as always, so clear and covers a lot, whether people are new or a bit more experienced, and lots of scribbling, lots of thinking going on during that session. So really appreciate that. And people have your contact details. And I'm sure there'll be people who would be willing to follow up with you afterwards. But lovely to see you again. Thank you so much indeed.